Good evening, Ambassador Michael DeSombre. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening, Nattha. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, very clear.
Great.
Ambassador, we just heard what the president told Americans that they have to be prepared for the next painful 2 weeks. So, what's the message that you'd like to tell Americans in Thailand as well?
Yes, I think the American President Trump was obviously presented a very sobering message of the challenges that the U.S. will be going through in the next few weeks. We in Thailand have been very pleased to see from the procedures and policies put into place that so far there looks to be a flattening of the curve in Thailand. The number of infections have maintained at around the 100 to 150 rate per day over the last week, which is an encouraging sign, but we all need to remain vigilant. Obviously, the most important thing that we in the U.S. and the government here in Thailand has been focusing on is social distancing, staying at home, as today myself and Khun are here obviously not in the studio, but at home, and that's very important. The more we can stay at home, the more we can keep ourselves at least 6 feet away from everybody else, the more we can wash our hands and avoid touching our face, the better everyone will be. We in the U.S. Embassy have been focusing for over 2 weeks now on extreme teleworking, having no more than 10% of our staff in the office at any one point in time, consistent with the Royal Thai government's plan to decrease activity on the streets and in general by 90%. And I think those policies look to be having a positive effect.
Ambassador DeSombre, as an American, you must also be shocked by the dire warning from the President about the potential of such a large number of deaths if the stay-at-home or the social distancing practice is not strictly enforced. So what was your reaction when you heard the message from the President?
I've been watching the presidential daily briefs every day. I find them crucially important. And the one this morning, Thailand time, was obviously particularly sobering and obviously really showed the importance of the message that we all need to do everything that we can do to minimize the impact of the virus. I think otherwise, many of the messages from the daily brief have really shown, have given me great optimism, quite honestly, that when you take the American economic system and free enterprise, ingenuity, and dedication, when fully unleashed to try to vanquish the virus, we will succeed. I think what we've seen in the last couple of days is the U.S. now has tested over 1 million people, more than any other country in the world. We're now at a rate where we're testing more than 100,000 people per day. We have 20 new approved methods of testing, including one from Abbott Laboratories that can do a positive test in as little as 5 minutes. We have 10 companies producing ventilators, including Ford and GM and others. And the hope is that not only will we satisfy the need for all of these products in the U.S., but we will be able to satisfy the need globally as the virus continues to spread throughout the world.
Ambassador, what's your hometown in the U.S. and what's the situation like right now?
I grew up in Chicago, Nattha. Chicago is one of the cities that appears to be being hit by the second wave, as it were. We saw initially Seattle and Washington being hit relatively hard. Now New York, we're seeing Detroit, New Orleans, and Chicago now being hit. I have my 2 80-year-old parents in a senior living home in Chicago where they have battened down the hatches, as we'd say from the Navy terms, and basically are staying at home and making sure that there's no contact between the outside and the people in the senior living home. It is going to be a challenging few weeks in America, as I think President Trump correctly advised Americans that we need to be prepared for that. But yet there is still light at the end of the tunnel. We do see that hopefully by the end of April, we will have reached and gone down the other side of the curve if we've been able to flatten it accordingly.
Ambassador, America now is being referred to as an epicenter of the pandemic. Of course, it's a very unenviable title. But I'm sure that a lot of American people must be asking themselves why such an advanced and prosperous country could have come to this. What you have an answer for this if you were asked a question?
It's a very good question, Khun. I think there's not a perfect answer to that, but I do think one of the challenges that we've discovered is that the world did not have sufficient information early on as to the virulency and the ease of transmission of the virus, and is something that caught people unprepared. And perhaps if there had been greater transparency at the source of the virus in Wuhan and Hubei originally, we would have had greater intelligence that would have allowed us to better prepare for this situation.
And with the vaccine, I'm sure the US medical doctors must be working against time and try to get the test result. Can you tell us the deadline or what's the progress in vaccine testing?
Well, Nattha, there's a lot of focus, obviously, on therapeutic drugs, and there's a few of those that have shown some efficacy that have been expedited by the FDA for various treatments, and there's definitely more being looked into. As to vaccines, I'm aware that there are some early trials of 5 vaccines and others, and people are obviously pushing that as quickly as possible, and we hope they can come out as quickly as possible. But obviously it's very important in connection with any therapeutics, any testing, any other aspects that we make sure they are completely safe. We don't want to have any circumstances where people rely upon tests and have them not be accurate, or where they rely upon vaccines and have them not be effective. And so obviously speed is of the essence, but accuracy and carefulness is equally important.
Ambassador, 2 weeks ago, you posted a video clip on the social media addressing the American people living in Thailand or on tour in Thailand who may need help or advice from the embassy. What has been the response from these people so far?
The response has been excellent, and the response divides into 2 different areas. We obviously have a very large number of Americans who make Thailand their home, and they will stay here and are prepared to stay here. We have other Americans who are tourists in this country. We have encouraged them and continue to encourage them that if they do not wish to stay in Thailand for the long term, that now is a good time to make their way back to America, now that there are commercial flights available. But we at the U.S. Embassy stand ready, obviously, to assist all Americans in Thailand. The health and safety of Americans in Thailand is my top priority, and we will continue to be available to assist Americans with emergency issues as they arise during these challenges.
Ambassador, you have just started officially in Thailand, so what's your day like this day? Because it's just the beginning of your post in Thailand.
Yes, I think many people have asked me, is this what I expected it would be as the ambassador to Thailand? I think the simple answer is no, but I've always expected that the health and security of Americans in Thailand and in my mission would be one of my top priorities. At the moment, the vast majority of my time is focused on that, on the health and security of my mission employees and Americans in Thailand. I spend most of my day dealing with these issues and will continue dealing with those issues to ensure that we keep all Americans safe here in Thailand.
And how do you deal with daily practice, and especially your staff? Many must be working from home and staying at home right now.
That's true. As I mentioned, we have about 10% of our people in the office at any one point in time, and the others are all teleworking. It's quite interesting. Coming from the private sector, I'd always been used to teleworking around the world in hotels, from home, sort of everywhere that I travel. Rarely would I actually be in the office. I came to appreciate that that was not the case in government, and that most people had not been accustomed to teleworking. So there was an initial process of acclimation, shall we say, but I can tell you, Khun and Khun Nattha, that things have worked out very well. People that 3 weeks ago could not have imagined doing their job from home are now doing their job incredibly effectively from home, and it's working very well. And I've been very impressed by the ability of my mission community to adapt to the changing circumstance and still continuing, pursuing their mission.
And the problem is that they may not want to go back to work in the office physically again.
I think there may be some of that, Khun, although I do believe that most people are very much looking forward to the day that they can go back into their full activity as before.
I see. My guess is that all the non-essential diplomatic functions where diplomats have to be present physically are off the table, at least for the foreseeable future, right?
Well, I was told that I was expecting a lot of my role to be attending, evening dinners and receptions and national days and doing those sorts of things, and that definitely has disappeared. We aren't doing any of that. Everybody in all the missions are respecting social distancing, so that's exactly right. But the basic functions of Mission Thailand, the U.S. Mission Thailand, are continuing as normal. We are continuing all the work in the economic areas, the political areas, the other areas that the United States expects us to be doing out here. And one thing I've told my staff is that this is the period when the American diplomats abroad are truly essential, when we're the ones really having the full interaction, being able to explain what's going on the ground, and really being able to provide information and viewpoints that are not as easily accessible from the United States anymore. So we're actually very much the crucial aspects of U.S. diplomacy now, more than ever.
How do you see that? Do you see how the U.S. and China can work together in a global leadership role to fight against the virus, despite their differences or spats that they may have in recently?
I think it is very important during this crisis for all countries and every person to do all that they can. I do believe that China bears unique responsibility to contribute to the health crisis around the world. I think with the period in December and January in Wuhan, where even the Chinese own procedures that they developed during SARS had not been implemented and mistakes were made, it's important to understand what those mistakes were so that we can avoid them in the future. But most importantly, every country needs to do the most that they can to help humanity at this point in time.
And the way the U.S. president addressed the virus as Chinese virus, do you think it's the right way to address it?
Again, Nattha, as I mentioned, I think it's undisputable that the virus originated in China. It originated in Wuhan. I don't think there's any dispute about that. And I think it's very important that we look at exactly what happened, that China is fully transparent as to the origins of the virus, so that we can ensure that this situation does not happen again. That is what China assured the world after SARS, was that they had put in place appropriate procedures to ensure this would not happen again. But yet, it happened again.
Now, under this very extraordinary situation, are there any special or specific instructions from the State Department as to how diplomats in Bangkok, U.S. diplomats in Bangkok should conduct themselves or behave?
I think our instructions pretty much stay the same. I think we're probably left a little bit more to our own devices now than we had been before, because in D.C. you may have seen that Virginia and Maryland also have put in place relatively strict stay-at-home provisions. So the number of people in the U.S. government, working directly from their offices is also relatively limited. But fundamentally, our role stays the same. We're here as the tip of the spear, as I like to say, of American diplomacy. And I expect my mission and my diplomats to behave and to conduct themselves as they would always.
Ambassador, you must be familiar with economy in this region, Asia Pacific and Southeast Asia in particular. So what do you see the impact of COVID-19 on the economy in the region?
I think it's not just particular to this region. I think every country is obviously going to have significant economic hit from the virus. I think Thailand is well positioned in some areas, obviously in certain food exports and others. There's been actually an increase in exports out of Thailand, increased demand from around the world for certain aspects. But nonetheless, clearly, Thailand, like every country that's being hit by the virus, and even those that aren't at the moment, the global economy is going to go through some hard times. But I think what we will see is that, as President Trump has emphasized, unlike other business cycle recessions, this is a recession essentially caused by governments in shutting down economies in order to protect our people. As a result, it is a recession, if we have one, that will be immediately released and immediately solved once the governments restart the economies and let everybody else go back to work. So clearly there's going to be a short-term challenge, but I do believe that in the medium term, you will have a rapid bounce back.
Ambassador, do you have any uplifting message for the Thai people under these very extraordinary circumstances?
Well, I think the most uplifting message at the moment is that the government policies do appear to be flattening the curve. And that for those of us living in Thailand, we look at this and it is definitely not going the way of Italy at the moment or other countries where they've had massively increasing levels of infection. So I think everybody in Thailand should be very pleased about that. We still need to remain very vigilant. And I think everybody's continued cooperation with the social distancing and other government requirements is crucially important to ensure that we avoid having a significant spike up. But otherwise, I do think that the U.S. economic engines of free enterprise and innovation will come to the rescue of the global economy and the global crisis, because we're seeing that already, and there's been no crisis in history that when you have the U.S. economic engines and the U.S. government focused on addressing that crisis, there's been no crisis that we have not overcome.
Do you see this uncertain circumstance will have impact or affect the U.S. presidential election by the end of this year?
I think what we're seeing in the last few weeks is that President Trump's approval rating has been going up. And people are appreciating the leadership that he has brought to the situation and appreciating the experts that he brings around him in making sure that he addresses the problem appropriately. So I think that his leadership is well on display. American public is appreciating that, and that will continue through the rest of the year.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed, Ambassador, for joining us, and stay safe and enjoy working from home right now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me on tonight. I appreciate
Stay
it.
safe. All right.
Thank you, Ambassador. So that's the view from the U.S. Ambassador to Thailand, Ambassador Michael DeSombre.